Hello and welcome to the Amateur Skeptics podcast, podcast number 26. With me tonight is the usual suspects, Ian.
Hello, everybody.
And of course, we've got Mac.
I'm still here.
And special guest, Angus.
Hey, how's it going?
How are you guys doing tonight?
Good.
Doing all right.
Doing all right. Mac?
I'm doing okay.
Okay?
Yeah, I'm doing okay.
Like fine but not dandy?
Fine, but not dandy.
All right.
You know, actually kind of had an interesting day. My brother-in-law was having technological surgery. Very cool scientific surgery. They, rather than replacing his hip, they resurfaced the socket and the ball so that he's basically got metal in there instead of cartilage.
Yeah, they do a metal coating over the joint. Yeah.
And I think that's very, very cool. But we were glad to hear that he came out of surgery okay, since he's not in the greatest of health.
Very good. All right. So now this isn't technically our anniversary podcast. The next one is.
Well, the date Sam was saying was our first one was 126.
Yeah,
so
but
this is the closest to our anniversary.
We got to go there. We do 26 a year, so I guess it is. But the next one's really the start of our new year.
Yeah, but basically we've been around for a year now at this point.
Brian,
all right.
You forgot our anniversary?
That's a major faux pas, dude.
Yeah, I know it is, isn't it?
I don't know even why I podcast with you.
You know what? You don't want to know what's even worse is that I don't know when my wife and I really got married or when we really got together. She has dates, kind of, but it's not that big a deal. So that's how big a jerk I am.
I think they put that on your wedding certificate or something,
Yeah.
or like the photos, maybe.
No, there's no photos. We got married for insurance purposes.
Okay.
See, with
In your living room, yes.
with my wife and I, we remembered what date we got married, but we couldn't remember what year.
You guys got married when my son turned 1 year old, so I very much remember.
That's right.
Well, yeah, but we couldn't exactly call you to find out.
When Quinn's birthday is.
Yeah.
If you want to know how long you guys have been married, just call me and I can tell you. 1 year less than my son.
All right. Well, very good. So yeah. So I think
probably
that
would have been a better solution. I went to the box where we've got our important documents to get the wedding certificate out, not realizing the box was booby trapped and that there was a cord from an iron in front of it.
All right.
So I got that iron on my foot.
Actually, you guys have easy. You were married in 2000.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, so very good. So I think that we'll actually the next week is our one, or the next podcast 27 will be our 1 year anniversary.
Okay, that'll be the official beginning of our second year.
Exactly, the official beginning.
Okay.
All right. So this Saturday, I went up to Boulder for Drinking Skeptically, which is where I met Angus. And Angus is they have a student group up there. Is it a student group? What exactly is it, Angus? Why don't you tell me?
We are, let me read the official boilerplate here. We are an unaffiliated student group at CU Boulder. I'm not entirely sure what affiliation means, but we aren't. So, yeah, it's all students. We do get some people from the outside, people that aren't CU students, and people that are, just adults from the community, but it's pretty rare. It's mostly just students.
Very good. And so that is the SSASS, the Students, Secular, and Skeptics Society.
Secular Students and Skeptics Society.
Okay.
Get it right.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It's only 4 S words.
Everybody that I met there, nobody wanted to say the full name. They just wanted to say SAS. Nobody wanted to, it's like, nobody wants to say it.
It's because it's like 14 syllables.
Who has time for that?
Yeah, so SAS.
Yeah, SAS.
So yeah, that was a lot of fun. Phil Plate showed up, and I don't think I've met him before. He thought I looked familiar, but I don't think so. So that was nice. Meeting Phil Plate, I enjoyed that.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, so that was fun. And then on Sunday, Ian and I went down, and we there was a gentleman from the Denver Atheists talking about the Mormon endowment ceremony. Ian, what'd you think of that?
It was interesting. It very telling, a lot of it, the repetitiveness, we had talked about afterwards how there really seemed to, you could almost feel the brainwashing listening to the ceremonies because it was so mind-numbing, so repetitive, and the idea that they had to go through this over and over because they have to do it for themselves and they have to go back over for all of their ancestors who were not of the church in order to get them baptized. And so the idea is to go through this mind-numbing ceremony over and over and over again until you're just so,
Did you think it was mind-numbing? I found it extremely interesting, even the ceremony in and of itself. I imagine once you've done it,
didn't think of going through that ceremony. Though.
Well, I
That's the
I
whole
think the
thing.
first time it's probably entertaining. It's your first time. It's probably
Yeah.
exciting. Probably once you get to 20 or 30 of them, it's not so much anymore.
Right.
And
And we also learned that to get into heaven, you have to know all the secret all the secret handshakes.
yes, and we know the secret handshakes now, and we know so and so we can show you these, and the next time you meet a Mormon, you can give them their secret handshake, freak them out a little bit.
I know the secret handshake. The one that's always worked for me is that you have a folded 50 in your hand,
I
and that's
don't know
accepted everywhere.
That works on the maitre
not sure if it
d'.
is to get to heaven though.
Yeah, for the Mormons, they just take that and they continue talking.
Yeah, but I think St. Peter will take Andrew Hamilton and let you in.
You can't pay them enough to be quiet.
Alexander Hamilton. Okay.
All right. So one of the things that the SSASS has coming up is Darwin Week. So Angus, why don't you tell us a little bit more about Darwin Week?
Well, Darwin Week, Darwin's birthday, or, the anniversary of his birth, since he's not alive anymore, is this upcoming, I believe, Saturday, February 12th is the birth date of Charles Darwin. And so we're celebrating with the week preceding that, the 7th through the 11th, celebrating sort of the life of Darwin. And then we've branched out to a couple of more general topics. Cosmic creationism, we're addressing irreducible complexity, and some sort of general talks about evolution and morality, science and spirituality, and why people misunderstand science in general. Just the difficulty that the average person has with grasping the scientific process.
So now my understanding is that there will be a couple talks a day. And is this next week that this is happening, or the week after?
It is next week. The
It
first
is.
talk, yeah, it's a couple talks a day. The first talk is 2 p.m. on Monday the 7th. That's Vic Stenger talking
That's
about
actually 2
cosmic
weeks,
creationism. Yeah, and then that
The
goes...
7th in 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Oh, that is 2 weeks. You're right, yeah.
Yeah. All right. And so is there a schedule for this somewhere?
Yes, the schedule is on our newly minted website, which I've been working on
Okay.
tirelessly for the past few days, and that's ssass@cu.blogspot.com, and that's written out. It's part of an address, not an email address.
Well, make sure we get the address so we can throw it up on Amateur Skeptics and our Facebook page.
Yeah, no, we'll throw it. Yeah, well, absolutely. That'll be in the show notes.
Right,
for
there's a
people
link
can
to it
get
on
that.
our Facebook page, but I can
good.
definitely email you guys that. Yeah, and then there's a calendar tab on that page, and there's a Darwin Week tab on that website with sort of more details on what all the upcoming events are and the people giving the talks and stuff.
That sounds really great that you guys are doing that. I hope that maybe you guys can record some of those and then we can put them out for you.
Yeah, that's possible, sure.
So-
I'm not sure exactly what the venue's going to be or who's going to be where. I'm busy for half of these. I've got class during those times, but I will definitely bring that up during our weekly meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, I did think that was kind of odd because certainly if they were one day, somebody can plan to come down and listen to all these talks, but it's more difficult the way that they're spread out, I think.
Yeah, well, I think the idea was to accommodate the most people because we're trying, we don't just want our group going to these talks. And so if we spread them out throughout the day and throughout the week, then we'll be able to get people from various levels of interest and, various schedules is the main thing.
Right.
Just to make sure that the general public has a chance to see at least some of the things that are going on.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. Well, good. I hope that we can help you out and get some people up there to see these talks. I know I'd like to come up there if I can. We'll just have to see what the schedule looks like.
Well, that'd be great. We'd love to have you.
Yeah. All right. So Skeptic Camp is coming up, and I was talking to Rich Orman about that, and he's the main organizer there. He's trying to wrangle Reed into helping him out. I don't know if that's going to happen. Reed really wants to step back, but either way, I'm going to be helping out with Skeptic Camp. And I will certainly be doing a talk for Skeptic Camp. So if anybody else is interested in that, we'll put a link on the site. If anybody else is interested, at least going, or even if they're interested in planning, we'll try and get that information up.
And we'll definitely keep everyone updated on that one as it gets closer and we get more information on it.
Yeah. So.
Because we had a blast there last year. It was well worth doing. So, and this year it should be bigger and better.
Yeah, well, last year was kind of small because things kind of fell apart and they kind of did it kind of late. So we're getting started much earlier putting everything together this year. So hopefully we'll have a much better attendance. All right. Angus, is there anything else you want to tell us about the SSASS or Darwin Week and everything before we move on here to our next topic?
I can't really think of anything. No, I mean, I'll send you guys the website. I'll find you on Facebook or something so I can get the URL out there because we've got the full schedule online. And yeah, I mean, I don't know how many of your listeners are in the Boulder area, but if any of them are, these are all open to the public. Yeah, and it's a cool subject. Evolution's hard to understand, and we've got people explaining it in terms that anyone can understand. So if you've ever wanted to know how all this works and what the fuss is about, this is the place to do it.
Excellent. Okay, that's great. All right, so now we're going to move on to one of my favorite topics.
Oh, yes.
Topic for tonight.
Oh man, I spent too much time on it. So yeah, I'll let you start this because you put it in here. So start us with what's the hubbub about?
About 15 years ago in my college astronomy class, we had talked about this, how the Earth is at a wobble, and so the constellations do rearrange themselves slightly. And legitimately, for some time now, your horoscopes have been out of line because the zodiac has not lined up the way it did several thousand years ago when they first invented this system. And so right now, finally, to show how far behind astrology is from actual science, they're finally starting to say, hey, let's rearrange, let's adjust the whole horoscope thing to fit where we scientifically accurate zodiac is now.
Right, but this isn't suddenly. This comes up every so often. We talk about it a little bit, and then it goes away for a while, and then it comes back. It's something that we've known about for a long time. This is nothing new. It's been pointed out for years now, and nobody really cares, and it doesn't really affect anything. I mean, anyway.
Yeah. Well, but
it's like they took a vote this time, and Ophiuchus won.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've added in the 13th astrological sign. At least whoever's backing up this new change. But I just love the fact that it shows just how far off science is. The fact that they've been able to ignore a lot of this for so long. And I think one of the reasons they're ignoring it is so many people are so into it that if the signs suddenly change like this, there are people that are definitely going to be fighting it.
So yeah, now here's the thing. One of the criticisms that's made of skeptics when they approach this topic is that they don't understand it. I happen to not be in that category because when I worked on the psychic line, one of my main interests was astrology. So I understand, that it isn't, they complain that it's not just sun sign astrology. Of course, you get other astrologers that claim that it is still good. So you have you have your primary sun sign, and then each of the planets is in a different sign at the time of your birth. So Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Uranus, Saturn, they all supposedly go into developing your personality. And then, of course, we have a system of 12 houses, and then you have a rising sign. So depending on where the rising was at the time of your birth will indicate where house 1 starts. So then you have these 12 houses that are supposed to represent different things, and then you have all the different planets that are in those different houses. So not only do we have the effect of Mars, we have the effect of Mars in the 12th house on that's supposed to be on your personality. So this gets awfully complicated, and that's one of the issues that I have with it is it gets so complicated that nobody can agree on the actual effects. When I've studied with 2 different astrologers, and I would go and then I had access to a whole bunch of others. So I would take what I learned from one, and then I would go and ask all the different ones, about a certain thing on a chart, and every single one of them would give me a completely different interpretation of what that meant. And they'd like to say, well, that's like going to a doctor and getting a second opinion. Well, it's one thing to go to a doctor and say, should I have this lump removed? And it's another to say, well, this in this house says that you are an angry person, and another person who says, well, this in this house says that you have a temper, or you're a nice person, or you have issues with connecting to your emotions. And you'll get all these different answers for one particular thing on these charts.
Well, I read my son got a hold of a kid's almanac, and it had the astrology stuff in it. And I read through every single one of the signs. And I'm like, you know what? I fit that at times. I fit that one at times. I fit that one at times. I fit, every single one of them. I fit at certain times. Yes, some days I'm shy and hiding in the corner and stuff, not wanting to deal with things. Other days I'm outgoing and expressive and stuff. And I found it so interesting because legitimately everyone fits into every one of those things at some point, depending on the day. But I know no one who day by day fits those exactly.
No.
So you definitely, just reading that, can see exactly how the game's played.
Well, and that's when they go into their special pleading and say, well, you can't just look at one sign. You have to look at the whole chart as a whole. And now, not only are you looking at the whole chart, for each day, you have to figure out where the planets are and where the transits are. So you'll have a planet transiting another planet. So the moon, once a day, pretty much, will transit your moon. So realistically, because the moon is supposed to control emotions, when you have these different transits through the day, you should have these different effects on your personality throughout the day that we should be able to look at. And that should be interesting. And of course, we have Mercury, which goes around the sun fairly quickly, so it'll transit your Mercury. And then, of course, you know how when you're looking at Mercury for it starts to look like it's going backwards. They call that a retrograde. And of course, they think that when the planet is retrograde in your chart or in that day, that can affect communication issues. And so they'll use special pleading to say, if they can't communicate, they say, oh, Mercury's retrograde. And I can't tell you how often you would hear that. I mean, it was all the time.
Or, you're going along fine and everybody's telling you, well, you just wait till you hit your Saturn return.
Exactly. When you're about 27, 28, you're going to get that Saturn return, and that's going to be a huge change in your life.
Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with that. It's actually the time where there's normally huge changes in people's
lives.
Well,
not to go back, the human's lifespan used to be 30 years. About 27, 28, you were getting ready to die.
And now it's really a lot of people, that's only when they get married and start having families and such, because it's the mid-age now.
Right, so you use some special pleading to say, well, that's because that's when Saturn enters your transits, the Saturn in your chart about that time. And particularly if you have Saturn in the seventh house there, that's going to be a very good indication that at that time you're probably going to get married.
It has nothing to do with the fact that generally that's time people are finishing up school and other stuff like that and getting their lives together and are actually ready to move on to that next stage.
No,
that's true.
It does not.
All right, so Brian, maybe you can answer something that the articles that I'm looking at don't answer. Ophiuchus is what? Earth, air, fire, or water?
Oh man, I have no idea. That is
they don't list it.
They don't, and that's funny.
Yeah.
So each sign is represented by earth, air, fire, water. And so,
that's the thing. A 13th sign throws that off because there were 3 for each.
Right, but it works better as far as the actual moon cycle. That's the thing. Is that having have it follow the 13 moon cycles fits far better. It really makes more sense, and it was removed probably most likely, I think, is because 13 was that number. The 13th, Friday the 13th. That number had a lot of bad stigma behind it.
13 loops and a hangman's knot. 13 is the death card in the tarot deck.
Right. Stuff
all
like
these
that.
All these different things.
Well, now, of course, that's interesting that you bring up the tarot deck because, the death card in the tarot deck usually just means transition, depending on who you ask. It doesn't necessarily mean
people still don't like to see it.
Well, no, but, So, I mean, there's all that goes into it as well. So,
I'm astonished at how uneven the ranges for all these different signs are now.
Right.
Scorpio's only got like 6 days in Scorpio.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy. It used to be, it was a series of 30 degrees, and it changed every 30. And you can look out at the sun at the right time and see which constellation is out there, and you can see. That's one of the ways that you can look and verify some of this is by looking out at the sign out there that on what did they call it, the meridian, or I forget exactly how they look at that, but you can go and verify this for yourself. And I was looking for there was an article that specifically talked about how to go out and do that, and I think that was on the 365 Days of Astronomy podcast where they talked about this, and that was 2 years ago that they did that.
Then Ophiuchus has got 3 weeks and apparently no actual element associated with it. Maybe Ophiuchus is dark matter. That'd be trendy.
Oh my god! So I don't know how much we want to go to that. I'm interested to move on to the astrology and mice.
Yeah, well, that one.
Okay, but
Yeah.
I found the original studies, I found the news reports from the original studies that talked about this. And going through this article, what is it, from naturesomething.com, they repurposed this data to try and make it sound like it was astrology.
They used mice born in winter as one of the examples to defend astrology.
Right.
It's like winter's not just one sign; it's a bunch of signs, and then the fact that the body chemistry in winter is going to be different. So actually, it almost makes sense for things born in winter to be a bit off because
Okay,
the
so
seasonal changes.
yeah,
sort
let
of
me-
affect that you'd think.
Let me address the original study. The original study was very clear, and I finally found an original, the original talk where it talked about this. So what they did is they took these different mice and they artificially put them into these lighting cycles. So they artificially changed the lighting cycles to either be a winter mode or be a summer mode or on the equinox. And so they use these different light cycles to see how the light cycles would affect the mice. And in no way can this represent astrology because
Right.
they didn't look at the sun sign for each of these. They weren't actually born at different times of year. All of this was done artificially.
Okay.
And so when you really look at what they did, they would artificially create winter. They would artificially create summer. They would artificially create spring and fall on these mice. And then what they did is they looked at, and these were special mice. These were special knockout mice, which they had a fluorescing chemical in part of the brain so they could see which part of the brain's lit up. And specifically, the things that they were noticing were stuff like bipolar disorder and other neurological conditions that they were looking for. So in no way was this study designed to look at astrology. So it is just mind-boggling that they even tried to make it such, because the special pleading that has to go into it for that to happen
Right.
is astronomical, because they weren't born in the winter necessarily. A winter mice could have been born in the dead of summer, and they weren't looking at temperature differences. They were only looking at light differences on these mice, and it was done on mice, not humans. In no way can we say that this study affects humans as well, and then it was only one study. Okay.
Well, that's the other thing.
2 points.
Okay, go ahead.
2 points, Brian. First of all, it's not astronomical; it's astrological.
Oh, I'm sorry.
specifically
Thank
in
you.
this case.
Thank you. Thank you.
Secondly, the lights they were using were set up in patterns of the astrological signs.
Oh my God.
No, they weren't. They weren't. I made that up. I can't support that.
You can't
But-
support that in any way.
Yeah, but still, the referring
But
to
that would be a
personality-
way to do it and work astrology into it.
How would you do that though? Because what you have first, that you're going to have to decide what the effect is from the planets that affects the mice in a certain way, and you're going to have to control and recreate those conditions perfectly. So if it's magnetism, which I've heard claimed, how are you going to control for Jupiter's magnetism effect on the mice in that environment, plus Jupiter's, plus Mars, plus Uranus, plus Saturn? And besides the fact that we can't measure magnetism on our planet because it doesn't reach that far even from Jupiter, who has a huge magnetic field. It doesn't touch us. It does touch Saturn.
I just like to hear you talk about Uranus.
But the article also talked about, the mice's personalities could be determined. The only thing they said were that mice born in winter were slower.
Well, and they were more likely to be bipolar in some of these other neurological conditions.
And it's like that's not necessarily personality-wise. It's not, you don't know what their likes and dislikes and stuff like that from that.
No, and
And
they
mice
didn't.
don't really have that much personality in the first
Right.
place.
That's the other thing.
Well, the other problem I
How do you
have.
determine mouse personality?
You're right. That's part of my problem.
Versus-
Nobody sat down with these mice individually and found out their likes and dislikes.
A mouse's personality is pretty much chew, eat, screw.
Oh, and
Yep.
oh, human, run!
Yeah.
Can that thing eat me? Get out of here! So I'm glad I finally found some of the original stuff here that it's actually talking about. And they say in this article, in no way is this astrology. They were very clear that this is not astrology and cannot be used to prove astrology. It's just ridiculous. So I went through these other articles that you put in here, Mac. Thanks a lot
Yeah.
for wasting a whole bunch of my time.
Okay, we needed to give thoroughness to the subject.
So here's my, and I didn't go through these point by point because, man, it would take me a long time. I can do that if you feel it's necessary. But when you look at these, either they don't link, they claim science and don't link to anything, or they link to these terrible articles that really aren't science. And the other thing I noticed that they've done a lot of cherry picking, for their data to prove this stuff, and then they go off on these tangents in weird directions where I'm not even sure where it was trying to come back and really connect. But the one thing I did notice is that I read an article earlier that said, I've heard that it's gravitational effects, which, okay, there are some gravitational effects, but then this astrologist says, no, it's not that. He didn't say what it was, but he says, no, it's not gravity. These particular people said it's magnetism, but magnetism effects wear off very quickly. We would not feel a magnetic effect from Jupiter, even Mars. We don't even know that Mars has a magnetic field at this point, do we? And if it is, it's extremely weak. Venus, I don't know how we would feel magnetism from there. Much more likely gravity. And then there was somebody else gave a quantum mechanics connection, kind of an entanglement type of deal, and said that quantum mechanics works on this big scale and this little scale, which it doesn't. It works on a very, very small scale, and it doesn't scale up very well.
Something I noticed when I was putting those articles in there was that the actual sourcing that we've got here, the sites are not really. They're definitely sites that have a confirmation bias to say astrology is real stuff. Well, they're not really looking at it scientifically. They're looking for reasons why it's scientific.
And didn't you think they did a lot of cherry picking?
I did.
Yeah,
I truly did.
So, it would be difficult to go through this point by point trying to use their sources because their sources aren't really sources. And in some of these articles I noticed, particularly like the one with the astrology and mice, every source that they put on there linked back to themselves. No external sources did they use for this. So I thought that was pretty interesting too. They are the complete source. So
on the scientific evidence suggestive of astrology, that article, which is on neardeath.com, he talks about the principle of astrology as being expressed in saying as above, so below, which is he throws in quantum physics terminology, it means that which applies to the very large applies to the very small,
which isn't true.
Yeah, it's not even it's not part of quantum physics. In fact, it's actually a principle of magical belief and religious belief. So
right, and I tend to agree with that. Once again, no real evidence. They all claim scientific evidence, but when I went looking at what they were linking to, it wasn't really scientific evidence. That they don't link to anything that I would call credible. They certainly, the most credible thing that they could talk about was this mice study, which, interestingly enough, the astrology and mice never actually links back to any source. They don't even give a source. They vaguely talk about where the information came from, and then they gloss over it from there. So I was, I found it humorous, and I spent a lot of time going through this stuff, trying to be objective.
And I thought you would enjoy doing that. And it sounds like you did.
I did. Yeah, I did. I say you wasted a bunch of my time, but yes, I actually did enjoy going through it. And like I said, I studied astrology for a long time. And one of the things, that one of the ways I started to realize just how bunk it was that I could never get a straight answer from an astrologer about what a certain thing in a chart meant. And then when you read a book, it's completely different from what every astrologer tells you. And every book is different as well. In fact, I went and I got some of my old astrology books, and I was leafing through them to see if there was anything that I could really use that would be quick. And it's like,
I think we may have lost Ian here.
Oh, did we?
Yeah, I think he's coming back online now.
Oh, should I pause?
And I think Angus dropped off too. So.
He did. He told me he was going to. Let me. Okay. I'm going to pause the recording. All right, Ian's back with us.
Okay.
Ian, do you have anything to say based on all the stuff that I just said that you missed?
You're wrong 100%. How dare you even make such claims? Okay,
there you have it. Okay, great. Great.
Well, you're just saying that because what sign are you now, Ian?
What am I now? I'm not sure.
Hey, guys, relax. We don't need to get into a fight about this. I'm going to portray my Libra for you here, okay?
Okay. I'm still going to be hurt by what you say, Brian, because I'm a Pisces now.
No, I want balance. I'm a Libra now. Damn Pisces. That's my Scorpio moon talking to you there. Conjuncting my rising in the 12th house, buddy, which makes me very psychic, by the way.
I got your 12th house. All right. So tell us about the chupacabra that was shot.
Oh, yeah. This, I threw this in here because, just real quickly, you're always seeing these claims of chupacabras, and they always turn out to be a dog or something, some sort of animal that has mange, and that's clearly what we've got going here. This is some sort of a possum or something, and I'm sure that there's no DNA testing or anything, but I'm sure that that's what we will find when the DNA tests come back. Because looking at this does not look that suspicious. It looks like some sort of hairless animal. So more than likely, it's something with mange.
It does look, actually, honestly, it looks like a armadillo with no shell.
Well, that's why I was thinking some sort of a possum or something.
Well, I just love
it really looks like an armadillo with no shell.
They say a possum. They think it's a possum too. They say that it's probably a raccoon or a possum. And looking at that tail, I say possum more than raccoon. But I don't know. I should take that back because I've never seen a raccoon's tail without fur. But possums generally that's kind of what the tail looks like.
Look at the shape. Go ahead, Ian. Sorry.
Okay. The man is basically a skin disease caused by parasitic mites.
Mites, yeah. And all the hair falls out.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. But I love the guy's reasoning for shooting this thing. That's what I just couldn't get over. I didn't know what it was, so I shot it.
I know, it's like, hey, this may be the first species of its kind. Kill it.
I'm glad I did because I don't know what it is. Okay.
Honestly, I look at the shape of the front claws, and they look like armadillo to me. Same with the shape of the head.
Right, but I don't think it's not.
And the tail's not long enough to be a possum's.
You don't think? I think
possum has a prehensile tail.
So it could be raccoon. I'm looking at the face. The face is very weaselish.
I'm still thinking armadillo.
I don't think so. I don't know how it could be an armadillo. They don't have hair in the first place. They get mange.
Well, I think the shell is actually got fur between the segmentations of the shell.
Okay, but where's the shell? Can you take an armadillo
that's
shell
what I'm
off
saying.
without
It's
it bleeding out?
shellless armadillo.
Yeah, well, I think like a turtle. If you took the shell off, it would kill it, wouldn't it?
I don't. Well, an armadillo is not a reptile. I don't know.
But still, it's like a turtle in regard that the shell is physically part of its body. It's not a separate thing that you can disconnect. It's not like a hermit crab that finds a shell and uses it. It's the shell itself is part of itself, and to remove that, you'd basically be killing it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. I think possum and raccoon are very good possibilities here. Why don't you show me a picture of a possum?
Okay, the armadillo shell is actually made out of bone.
Really? Wow. Not keratin.
So not really. I actually thought keratin too. Armadillos can swim, by the way. I've seen armadillos swim.
Excellent. That's the information I'm looking for.
That armadillos can swim?
Yeah, boy, that wraps it up.
Well, maybe it's some kind of anteater though too, because the shape of the head. If you look at an armadillo's shape of the head,
it's in Kentucky. So are there armadillos in Kentucky?
Oh, there's armadillos. I know there's armadillos in Louisiana. So
okay, so maybe, but there are definitely possums, and there are definitely
and
raccoons.
I thought the head looked like a possum head.
You guys, wait, hold on, whoa, come back. This is a chupacabra. Why are we trying to give this a mundane explanation? What are we doing? You know what? It's a chupacabra. Can we move on now?
All right.
We're spending too much time on this dinky little article that I don't have that much to go with here.
I think it's amusing and it's interesting
to
see. But yeah,
oh yeah, it is.
We can move on.
All right. So this one, where's this one from?
This is from Reuters.
Reuters. Gene map study finds clues to pancreatic cancer.
Pancreatic cancer.
Pancreatic
cancer is one of the least survivable cancers.
Right, which...
pancreatic cancer, they said pancreatic cancer is diagnosed in nearly 37,000 people a year and kills more than 34,000 of those that are diagnosed. But what they're talking about in this article here is they're talking about there are different types of cancer that can take place in the pancreas, and certain types are more survivable than others. Certain types of cancers are less aggressive, and what they're talking about in this article is the molecular view of cancer, about actually tailoring the cancer treatment based upon the type of cancer and what its molecular makeup and genetic makeup of the cancer is, rather than just throwing chemotherapy at it.
So would you do a genome? Would you do a complete genome of it in order to treat it?
I would figure so. Yeah,
they did that. They did a genome. They did a complete genome of somebody's cancer, and that would be interesting if we could do a genome cheap enough that we could pull a piece off of it, do a genome, and then create a specific treatment.
What they
for
said
it.
here is that patients whose tumors had mutations in the 3 genes called MEN-1, DAXX, and ATRX lived at least 10 years after the diagnosis.
Really?
More than 60% of patients whose tumors did not have these mutations died within 5 years. What they were talking about, one of the people they were talking about in this article is Steve Jobs.
Right.
And that he said in 2004 he had undergone successful surgery for a pancreatic neuroendocrine tumor.
One of the people, his name is practically in the title.
Yeah. All right. So they're talking about Steve Jobs.
Yeah. Well, it's big news because he's he's got to go away from Apple again and see if he can fight this. That affects Apple's stock dramatically, I think.
It does.
It's big news.
And the fact that he works for Apple does, in fact, make him, less likely to get treatment from doctors. Because an apple a day does keep the doctor away.
Particularly since they're using PCs, right?
Yep. And that joke wasn't PC.
All right. So, what is the difference between compulsive hoarding and collecting, Ian?
Get into something that is near and dear to both me and Mac here.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
funny because I was telling Mac, I'm like, you know what? Boy, this subject, it just isn't for me. But that's fine.
Yeah, but it screams us. That's the thing.
It does, absolutely. No, I agree. So tell me about it.
Well, the main thing is, if you read through the articles, everything I could find agreed on these 3 points. That the way to determine hoarding from collecting is a hoarder has an inability to discard anything, and when it comes to throwing out, he actually will go through some physical, emotional trauma. Then a hoarder, there is impaired function to the person's life. The hoarding has caused impairment. It causes him not to be able to do things, not be able to function normally. And then the third thing is the cluttered living space, where you can't use the rooms for the design for. Your kitchen is filled with stuff, your bathroom's filled with stuff. You can't actually, you walk around the house, you're going to be likely to trip over things, fall downstairs, stuff like that, because there's stuff everywhere.
You know what's
And those are
interesting?
3 main signs that everything I could find talking about comparing hoarding to collecting said to look.
Well, it is interesting in this article that they actually have a picture from a wall in your house.
I am going to ask Ian, when's the last time you ate off your dining room table?
That's where we play
To
games.
eat off of?
No. It's used for its purpose. That's where we play games. That is its
Well,
purpose.
Right now,
Yeah.
if I take games off and put them away, which I do from time to time, my wife then takes it over for crafts.
So it's self-defense?
It's
Yes.
The deadly art of game foo.
yeah.
No, but I thought it was interesting that this article got put up here, and I went and grabbed a couple more, but it does seem to indicate very much the same data. I think that there are degrees of hoarder, though, where there are milder degrees of hoarding and there are more severe degrees of hoarding.
Right.
I'm a collector, but I've probably got a bit of hoarder in me too.
Well,
My
I
parents
think
are collectors and they're
yeah.
collectors.
Yeah.
But like in my case, you come down to my basement, it feels cluttered, but I know I need to go through it, and I actually have no problem with the idea of throwing stuff out. I just want to go through it and make sure I'm not accidentally throwing good stuff out. And I know the difference between good and bad stuff. It's just time-wise. I've actually gone through and thrown out trash cans worth of stuff when I've taken the time to go through it.
Guilty of that.
Yeah, I do that too. With computer parts mostly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, there's a level where it looks like you're hoarding, but it's like, well, when I have the time, I can rationalize and go through it and actually get rid of a lot of it. But having the time is not anything to do. So, yeah.
Hold on. Is that special pleading? I don't have the time.
But you go through my upstairs. However, our living room may seem cluttered, but that's the kids' toys that we keep trying to get them to pick up. We have one room upstairs that you can't use right now, and that's because it's more the kids' stuff that.
Yeah, Ian, you don't have to defend yourself. Your house is usable. We come over there, we game.
Right.
The kitchen is usable.
The kitchen, the bathrooms.
Yes,
those
yeah,
are
no, it's
completely usable.
yeah,
So
no, you don't have to.
Yeah.
No, I'm giving you trouble, but you don't have to defend yourself.
I know.
Ian, I'm giving you a hard time too.
I
Your-
agree with them, but I
your
can point out
basement-
different there is.
Your basement appears cluttered, but you know the exact spots to step so that nothing collapses.
Hey, and I can find all sorts of stuff. You ask me for stuff in my collection. Oh yeah, I know exactly what box that is on what shelf. And I can hunt it down for you.
Where can we build a recording studio down there?
I could probably fit it in.
All right.
No, but I think, when I think also, and I've had this discussion with my wife an awful lot. I think that the hoarding tendency comes from being raised by parents who grew up in times when there wasn't plenty.
Sure.
Right.
And so you get that tendency from your parents to want to save things that might be good. You save that hard drive that you haven't tested to make sure that it's actually broken.
Yeah.
To save that,
To that though.
to save that, those pieces of that model, because if you find the rest of the pieces, you can glue it back together.
Well, I also save stuff like that because, for a while there, I was customizing models and stuff, and
Right.
I've saved all sorts of stuff that my wife said, "Why are you saving that?" And it may be a couple of years down the line, but suddenly it becomes useful. And it was in the way, but it wasn't in the way. I was able to push off to the corner where it was just mildly in the way, and it didn't impair anything, and it ended up being useful. I'm glad I had it. A lot of that stuff after I've used it, got rid of it because I don't need it anymore. So,
Ian, what made you think I was talking about you and not me, though?
Yeah.
but both of us are somewhat like that.
Uh-huh.
So, but I'm looking at examples, and but my wife's been watching a lot of those hoarder shows that are out there. I've caught a few.
Right.
They're interesting because these people have real problems. There was a guy who was an alcoholic who saved every single bottle and just shoved them. You couldn't put food in any of the cabinets in the kitchen because they were filled with empty liquor bottles.
I heard about that one.
You know,
Then you've got people like the guy who had his entire house was filled with dolls, and that was because that was what he related to, was his dolls.
Right. Well, another guy, recent one my wife was watching, this guy had some pet rats that got loose and kept breeding.
He was something else.
There were
He was
thousands of rats, and they were his pets.
And at least he was trying to take care of the rats. And the rats were taking pretty good care of themselves, too. The lady on the next show with the chickens in bins, oh, she was awful.
I didn't see that.
All right, guys.
You don't want to watch that one.
If
you have any good feelings about animals whatsoever, you do not want to watch that.
All right. Hey, we've got a lot more in this to cover here.
That's fine.
Okay, good. You feel like we've covered that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So quickly here, power balance at class action lawsuit. So this is coming out of Texas, I believe, class action lawsuit. And they are basically taking up the claims made by Power Balance, and they're suing them, for their false pretenses. So this is pretty interesting. I put a little a link, and there's probably more information. I unfortunately I got sidetracked by the astrology stuff, and Mac's right that it does interest me. So this one got put to the side, but here's this, and then I also put a link up here. Skeptical Inquiry. I got an email from them today. The Committee for Skepticism, SICOP. I guess it is still SICOP. CSICOP. And what they want people to do is go and put in a complaint about Power Balance. So I put a link up there to that. I'm hoping this email that they send me, I'll either republish this on the site or I'll find a link on their site to it. I didn't see that in there, but You're
talking about the FTC complaints?
Right. They want you to
Now, I've actually made a Federal Trade Commission complaint about a company that kept calling me, claiming to be my credit card company, which I dismissed their claim because I don't actually have a credit.
Oh, that's good.
That did give me some good evidence to that effect. They were talking about how they were going to reward me for always paying my credit card on time, and I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, debit card?
Yeah.
That doesn't have the same rules attached to it.
That's funny. That is definitely a scam that you've got there.
Yeah.
So.
And they kept calling and they got kind of nasty. And I filed a Federal Trade Commission complaint, and it's not difficult to do. If you feel you have a legitimate issue, it's not difficult to file that complaint. Well, it's just a few pages to go through.
And I think with Power Balance, there certainly is a legitimate complaint. So it's there if you want to get on there and do that. That link will be in the show notes as well. And hopefully I can find a link to the Skeptical Inquirer email, or like I said, I will republish that. So.
And they're looking for at least 5. The the suit, class action suit. They're looking for at least $5 million compensation. But Power Balance is saying there is no credible scientific evidence that supports our claims, and they admit that. Therefore, they engaged in we admit there is no credible scientific evidence that supports our claims. Therefore, we engaged in misleading conduct.
Right. They said that was okay.
It.
That was the Australian ones that came onto that. But then the U.S. Power Balance came out, and they had a whole Twitter campaign, basically saying, "Well, we admit that people love our products. We admit that people think our products work." And so they had a whole campaign to try and head that off. And then now we've got the class action lawsuit. So I'd like to see this go somewhere. I don't think it's going to make any difference whatsoever. I think
they've probably got themselves pretty well shielded. So
yeah, they probably do, and they can take all the claims off and still have the anecdotes, and then have a disclaimer that says there's no actual scientific evidence that this works, and they'll sell like hotcakes still. And and they'll still charge the $50 because the bigger the price you pay for it, the better the placebo effect. We know, so the price isn't going to change. It's going to be $30-$50. So we can see
the reason people keep buying it is because of 4 words: as seen on TV.
Yeah, I totally. Yep. All right, Ian. Quick thing about the Phelps issue.
Well, we're going to put the link in here. This follow up to the Phelps stuff from last time, but both me and Brian have kind of burned ourselves out on the issue, having exchanges on Facebook and on the Amateur Skeptics site. So check out the link. It talks about some of the stuff that was being done to try and keep Phelps and his group from being able to picket at the funerals. Feel free to leave some comments in our conversations that we've already had. Read the stuff we've written and see what you think. But like I said, we're kind of burnt out over the subject, but I didn't want to completely get rid of it because there's stuff out there about it. I think there's some important stuff to be seen here and discussed. So feel free to join in our discussions elsewhere, but we're really not covering on the podcast tonight just because, like I said, we're burnt out and we'd rather cover some other stuff.
We got lots of other better stuff to do.
I'm actually kind of thankful for the Westboro cult. And the reason I'm thankful for them is because it shows me that I'm not them.
All right, let's move on. Let's talk about Ray Comfort. Do we have to?
Well, basically, you watch that first video, it is a spot the logical fallacy.
I know it is. I know.
I found 5 definite ones, and I'm pretty sure there's others that I didn't quite catch.
Okay, so tell me a little bit more about this video before you go on.
The video is Ray Comfort on, what was the show? Nightline?
Nightline, and it's a Nightline debate that they were having, and what this first video is just the clip of Ray Comfort. But I went and when I was looking at this, I found the it looks like it's a 2-part series. I was hoping for more, but it looks like it's a 2-part series between Ray Comfort and Kirk Cameron and 2 members
it's about 2 hours of video.
Yeah, from the the Rational Response Squad that was debating them. Yeah. So I watched this. I've watched everything at this point. But so Ray Comfort comes and he says that he can prove he starts off by scientifically prove without invoking the Bible or faith that God exists. And he goes through this long spiel of utter malarkey, quite frankly.
I counted 5 definite logical fallacies in what he said.
Do you have your notes? You want to tell us what they were?
He talks mainly about the fact that the Earth exists indicates that it's a creation.
That was his first point.
And he equates the Earth to being like a man-made object.
Like
he
a
equates
Coke
the Earth
can.
to being like a car.
No, like being a Coke can. He says if I had this brown liquidy substance and over time a aluminum came up and formed around it and formed a can with a tab, and then eventually it got some color, some red and white color, and if you wanted to tell me that this object was not created, you'd be insulting my intelligence.
So within that, first off, he did ad hominem over and over again because he kept talking about eyes that see, brain that think. Saying if your brain's thinking, you're going to see things my way. He did that over.
No, that's not ad hominem. That's
no ad hominem.
I didn't take it as ad hominem. He wasn't necessarily.
It's not ad hominem.
No, it's
attacking the arguer and not the argument. He was busy saying if you don't see the way I do, you're not smart.
It's misdirection for sure.
But the other thing that he used as his proof was conscience. And honestly, conscience comes from society.
Yeah. Well, that's
And you
yeah.
could make the argument that society comes from religion, but it doesn't necessarily come from God. Religion
Well,
doesn't necessarily come from God.
I think
religion
you can,
comes from man's desire to explain the unexplained.
right, and to congregate. I mean, let's. I mean, it's religion is okay when it's about community building. If we can.
And to have a potluck if you're Methodist.
Exactly. Methodists like to have their potlucks, which is fine. That's the, but when they start creeping into science, that's where the problem is.
It's not always fine, Brian. What if everybody brings potato salad?
Yeah.
That could be a problem. That's why we have a list.
So I'll go through the other logical fallacies real quick he used. We were talking about the Coke can thing. He simplified evolution and the Big Bang, basically doing the straw man argument there. He ignored the bigger picture and basically simplified it so it sounded as weak as it could be. He did argument for consequences in the fact that he did bring up hell, saying that if you don't believe in God and stuff, you're going to hell, which definitely is not scientific.
Well, in which they bring up throughout the whole show, both parts, they continually fall back on that. Yeah.
Then he did special pleading in the fact that you need to understand the gospel in order for it to work for you. If you don't really understand it, it's not going to make any sense. And I saw what I looked up was called exclude the middle. And basically that's ignoring all the other possibility. If he can disprove evolution, it has to be his God and only his
Right.
God.
Yeah. If evolution doesn't work, then what he's saying has to work.
So those are the ones I caught. And you might be right about the ad hominem. What I was saying was ad hominem.
Yeah,
being something else.
Yeah,
it
that
felt
could be.
more ad hominem, but I do see what you're saying.
Well, what about when he says, even if there's a 1 in a million chance that only a 1 in a million chance that this is right, then you need to act on it. I mean that's fear, that's special pleading.
And then, of course, fairly quickly, he doesn't even follow his own rules, saying he's not going to look at faith because the Ten Commandments themselves are faith.
Well, and they're in the Bible, and so he breaks his rule right from the start. He goes to Scripture. He goes to Scripture immediately.
And he goes for the guilt trip thing, which is one thing he often uses because we're all adulterers, murderers, thieving, stealing, adulterous, whatever.
Actually, you know what? His what you're referring to as an ad hominem attack was actually an appeal to pride.
Appeal to pride, okay.
Okay, there you go.
Appeal to pride, because if you have eyes that see and a brain that thinks, well, of course I have eyes that see and a brain. I have one eye that sees and a brain that thinks. Okay, well, if you have eyes that see and a brain that thinks, you have to agree with me.
Right.
Yeah, there's some of that. It's interesting they go on and they're talking about the evidence for Jesus, and the Rational Response Squad is pointing out that the corroborating evidence for the Bible is very much lacking. And they go through some of it. And of course, Ray Comfort makes an appeal to the Bible that they don't understand Scripture and that they put too much faith in their history books. It's like, what? Well, what is the Bible if not a history book then? If it is an account of Jesus on this planet, then it is a history book and should be corroborated by other evidence. They talked about how the Romans had meticulous notes at that time, they kept meticulous records, and not a single one of their records brings up this Jesus person in any of the records. And so I agree that maybe some of these records got lost, but they don't have, if they crucified him, there's probably a note somewhere that they did so, but we don't have that evidence. Now, it could have gotten lost, and they could have actually put, some guy named Jesus up on a cross, and it stands to reason that they probably did. But then we're getting into the Christ myth territory, and his evidence against the Christ myth was the Scriptures, which, as it is for most apologists.
Yeah, no, I found it just interesting to look at the argument he's giving, because I honestly think there are believers out there who probably could do a better job. But
probably.
Yeah, I do too.
Ray Comfort's arguments are, essentially what we've got here is a guy who grew up with very little religious instruction whatsoever, and somehow spontaneously gained not merely religion but evangelism later in life.
Well, and that's the same with Kirk Cameron, and Kirk Cameron goes into this anecdote about how he found God, but clearly when you listen to Kirk Cameron talking about how he found God, going from an atheist to believing in God, it is is interesting, but clearly he was looking for something. He was already looking for God. He needed something to believe in. That was something that he needed, and that's when he found it, is when he really needed it.
I've seen people that do that, and it's a good thing for them to find it.
Right. And particularly for Kirk Cameron, when you listen to his story, he probably did need religion so he could start maybe act like a more decent human being. But not all of us need that.
Right.
No. You honestly, there is such a thing as secular humanism, which is the belief that people do not need religion. They don't need a supreme being in order to act like moral beings. So...
Yeah, and this comes back to, where do morals come from? And I really think they come from society first and religion second.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, certainly some morals do come out of religion.
You can say that the society may have been created by the religion in the first place. America began as a Judeo-Christian country.
I can say the other way around, too. When we were first starting to gather into tribes, we developed these religions in order to try and explain these things and get by. And
that's probably where religion comes from. But society creates religion creates morals, religion creates more successful society initially.
But you look through history, stuff like nudity, sex, adultery, alcoholism, lust, drugs, stuff like that are not defined from period to period exactly being moral or immoral.
Well, this is one of the...
It changes depending on the society. Even now,
it does.
Modern society, all that stuff is different depending on what country you go to.
Well, yeah, and so this is one of the things where I feel like the debates failed at is deciding where morals come from. They said in the beginning in their opening statements that we didn't need religion for morals, and I believe that's true. But they did not do a very good job of making their case against Ray Comfort, because they're like, if you don't have religion, then you don't have morality. You can do whatever you want. No, it's like, no, we have come up with these moralities from living in a society, and we've decided that as a group that it's not a good idea to go killing people or raping people.
Right.
So we're going to defend the group against these things, and that's where the morals have come from. And they didn't ever really say that. I think that they could have made a much stronger argument that these things come about the rules that we've decided that you must obey if you're going to live in a civilized society, if you're going to live with us.
Well, the two big rules that just about all societies have: don't steal, don't murder. Those still, morality-wise, you can find cases where you do need to kill, you do need to steal.
Okay, sure.
There's moral reasons at times where it's better to do those. A starving kid who steals a piece of bread. Guess what? That kid did something right. I'm not. You don't punish the kid for doing that. If you're being attacked, if you watch your wife getting attacked, if you go up and you kill that guy to defend her, morally, you're actually in the right.
Perhaps. I mean, you can make that argument, but right. I could also say that if you come over and pee on my lawn, is it okay for me to kill you?
Well, if it's defense, but that's
okay.
Not
But
defense.
now we're getting into does the punishment fit the crime, and this is why we have a legal system to make some of these decisions for us, because they're clearly bigger than the individual.
And you know what, Brian, Ian, we don't need the legal system in every case.
No,
I'm going to say two words: Curious Joel. You remember podcast 17? We talked about that town. They asked people politely, please don't dress crazy.
Right.
Dress nicely. Be respectful of our eyes.
Sure.
And that's when it all comes down to it. That's what society is. It's a set of agreements that says, you know what, we're going to do what we can to try to make it comfortable to live with each other.
And it's having respect for your fellow man. And I do not need religion for me to have respect for Ian and respect for you, Mac. I don't need a religion to do that, to know that the best way for you and I to have a relationship is for us to find a set of agreements that help us to get along.
Mac, you're trying to pick us up again.
I know. I'm thinking about taking him up on him. I'm a Pisces now, and I just need to be held.
I'll hold you, Mac. Even because I'm a Libra, I just want things to be balanced. So I will hold you. All right, so we got Ray. So are we done?
Last word on Ray Comfort.
Okay.
Because I have to use the words.
Okay.
Ray Comfort's, essentially his theories are his theories. And he wants people to believe his theories, but his way of arguing his theories is frankly batshit crazy. So he either needs to learn to, if he wants to support his opinions, he needs to research himself better, and he needs to actually know what he's talking about.
You know what?
Instead of just coming up with stuff to support his beliefs, he needs to actually find out what he's talking about before he tries to use things to support his beliefs.
You know, I gotta say,
like the banana thing.
yeah, I'd far rather have the Ray Comforts of the world than the Fred Phelps.
Yeah, I'd rather have Ray Comfort than the Westboro
Absolutely,
cults.
because we can have debates and arguments with Ray Comfort, and we can disagree with him, and we can probably still like the guy, the next day, even though we don't agree. We don't have to hate each other. But with Phelps, I think there's some issues of morality there, and I find it difficult to like the guy. Ray Comfort doesn't seem like a bad guy to me.
Yeah.
So
he seems like he's actually a pretty mellow, probably pretty good humored guy.
I think so.
As far as the Westboro cult goes, what they do to people is they divide people, and they make people crazy by how they act, and they have to be treated with sanity.
Right. And Ray Comfort is really trying to help people. He really thinks that what he believes is correct, and he thinks that if you believe the same as him, that you'll be better off. And maybe some people will be. So, you know what? Ray Comfort can stick around. I have no problem with Ray Comfort.
Doesn't hurt anybody.
Yeah.
He doesn't really hurt anybody. There are people who probably need what he's offering, and they go to it.
Right.
The people who need what he's offering are going to be convinced by his arguments. People who don't need what he's offering are going to look at his arguments, as we're doing right now, and say the arguments are weak. The arguments fail.
Right. And I agree that his arguments are fail. But once again, I would not have a problem sitting down and having a conversation with Ray Comfort. I think he's a nice guy. I think he really thinks he's doing the right thing. So I don't even know that I would want to even call him batshit crazy. You know what?
I actually don't think Ray Comfort is batshit crazy.
All right.
I think his arguments are.
Okay, and that's a good distinction. His arguments are crazy to me. So yeah.
Onwards then.
All right.
Let's talk about the stamping exorcism.
All right. So this what happened in Russia, and I think that's probably one of the reasons that I don't have more information. I have been looking, and I have a link to several articles here, and they all kind of say the same thing, and I've pieced together the information that I can. So this woman, Alexandria, went home, and I'm not even going to try to say the last name. Sorry.
Koshipitova.
She's 25 and the mother of 2. She went home for the holidays, and she apparently told her parents that she was hearing voices. Her parents decided that she was possessed by a demon and needed to be exorcised. They needed to get the demon out of her. So they told her to drink 5 liters of holy water. And when she couldn't do it, her father held her hands behind her back, and her mother tried to feed it to her, and they ended up throwing her on the floor. I say throwing, they put her on the floor somehow, and they started stomping on her. And then they stomped her to death. And they believed that they had killed the demon, not their daughter, and that in 3 days their daughter would arise. Well, in the adjoining room was her 2 kids. So I imagine that they heard the whole thing. In the morning, this lady was found by her younger sister, who called for an ambulance, and Alexandria was reported dead at the hospital.
Which means she was probably dead when the ambulance got there.
Oh,
but
I imagine
dead until a doctor sees them.
Right. I imagine she was dead the night before. I have
probably.
Right. And so now the parents have been arrested, and why did they have 5 liters of holy water on hand anyway? Maybe they didn't. Maybe they heard her say it and they went out and got the holy water. I don't know. And where they came up with the idea that somebody should drink 5 liters of holy water in the first place to get a demon out, I don't know.
I don't think you can even drink 5 liters of water.
Right.
You can drink about 2 liters of water a day.
Well, and she was a small person.
Yeah. Well, the article seemed to say they did just have it lying around the house.
Yeah, that's
the way it read.
Yeah,
well,
that's
but
what it implied.
The articles that we've got here, Ian, the articles are bad.
Right.
Yeah, they're terrible.
They're blurbs.
Yeah.
We've got 2 blurbs, one of which is definitely trying to the Morning Star. That is trying to make not light of the situation, but his bias is clear that he thinks the situation is disgusting,
right,
and he wants you to think the same way. So the Morning Star is not a good article.
Well,
no,
I'm
it's
not
not.
sure how you could not think it's disgusting, but
I understand that, Ian, and I think it's disgusting. But if it's going to be a good article, it's going to report the facts.
Right.
It's not going to report the person's opinion.
Right. True.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so some of these other court articles do a better job of that. They said that they've arrested the parents, and in questioning, the parents have stuck to their guns that they were trying to get the demon out of her. They didn't want they say they did not want to kill their daughter, but they thought she was possessed. I don't know how much of that is true and not true.
Although to think that someone unconscious should just be left alone for 3 days.
Oh yeah, and then it's going to
Yeah,
rise from the
that's-
dead. Yeah.
Yeah.
But but that's a common theme in these amateur exorcisms.
Yeah. I listened, I read the article, and it was talking about voices in the daughter's head.
Right.
And I have no information to back this up. I can ask the question, but there's no way of answering the question. But my question that I ask is, was she possibly schizophrenic, and was this something that may have been hereditary from one of her parents?
Yeah, and it may be, and we have no way of
Because-
knowing that, unfortunately. And we'll see. I'll keep looking for more information here. I don't suspect that we're going to get a lot more because it's got to be translated from Russian. And what if they're mistranslating it? What if it wasn't voices in my head? It was I don't know.
But my point is, to me, the parents' reaction seems extreme, even for a fit of religious mania.
You think?
Yeah, I think.
All right. Has pop culture gone too far? MTV is bringing Skins to the United States, which is a English TV show. And why are we talking about this, Ian?
Besides the fact that it reflects our culture, there's a lot to this. Okay, the TV show Skin was a British show that followed a group of teenagers who basically, get sex, drugs, alcohol. It was. I've seen the first 3 seasons. I don't know if they've made more.
There's a fourth.
I think it's an intense show.
There's a fourth season.
Okay, I'll have to find that down.
Yeah.
I personally think it's a really intense, well done show. It's, I enjoyed it. There was nudity in it. There was sex in it. It was all, cursing, everything. And it has been aired over here in America on BBC America. I haven't watched those, so I don't know how edited it was, but I can guarantee it was probably heavily edited.
Sure.
With everything that was in there. So then MTV decided to pick up the show and do it. And from what I've seen, I haven't seen any of the MTV episodes yet, but I've seen the previews and stuff. It looks to me like they basically just took the same scripts and probably edited them to fit the American audience and take out a lot of the stuff that they knew they couldn't get away with. So more than likely, what you're going to see on MTV is actually a much, much, much tamer version than what's already been aired on BBC America.
Who cares? I don't care if they dumb it down.
I have
Right.
one question about this on MTV.
Okay?
Why don't they play music videos anymore?
That
I
was
think
so
that's a fair
30 years
question.
ago.
That's a fair question.
I don't care. I mean, why is this an issue for you? I don't understand. I mean, you've seen the original, so you've
Well,
obviously had access
Look
to
at
it.
the main thing that really got to me was looking at the comments the parents had.
It's the comments
Um,
that got you going.
The replies to the
Okay.
the parents are really overreacting. One of them said got into talking about sex education and how I don't want he apparently disagrees with modern sex education, saying that my 6-year-old should not be learning how to use a condom, or my 6th grader.
So, yeah,
should
I
not be learning how to use a
disagree.
condom. And I'm saying, like, I want my 6th grader to know how to use a condom, because that's the point where they're going to start thinking about experimenting with that stuff. I want them to have knowledge. I want them to be thinking about this stuff. I want them to know the consequences. I want them to know how their body works. I want them to have the knowledge. And so to see a comment like that saying that my 6th grader should not be learning how to use a condom, I'm saying, like, you really want to have problems like that.
So, in other words, how this is affecting you personally is you don't like the parents reacting to it. You want your children to be completely informed, which I think is a good viewpoint.
Yeah. And then also the show, I honestly felt it was, I'm going to tell you how intense it was. There was a lot of realism in it. And I think a lot of parents are scared of that, the reality, because I know in my youth, I actually didn't do a lot of this stuff, but I hung out with people who did. And I remember one night, a girl who was on acid befriending a tree. And it was a traumatic experience to get her to leave that tree.
Whoa! What if she was just a druid, buddy?
Or maybe she was making friends with the dryad inside the tree. Did you ever consider that?
Yes, he was pretty gone.
You're being a little harsh here, buddy.
I saw, I saw some of that stuff myself. The same exact kind of stuff they have reflected in the show, and that was another thing where I'm like, okay, this show's doing a good job of showing how intense some of this crap can be. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing for teenagers to watch these shows because it doesn't necessarily make it something you want. I mean, these kids, some of the episodes got really intense in how messed up these kids' lives were. And so it's not like, oh, yes, I want to be just like him. It's kind of like, wait a moment, I'm not sure if I want to go that far into it.
It sounds to me like it'd be less useful for the kids and more useful for the parents to know what maybe their kids are getting involved in. And maybe the parents will, rather than commenting on this, maybe the parents will talk to the kids.
Well, this comes back to an issue of, well, my kids would never do that.
Yeah, right. But I definitely think the show itself, like Mac just suggested, would be a great thing. The parents watch. They say, okay, maybe I should talk to my kid about it, and even watch with their kid.
Or maybe just look at it and say, I'm really actually kind of lucky to have the kid that I do.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
So, it's one of those things, you see these parents overreact to it because we are a very Puritan society. And
we're over religious society too.
Yeah. And a lot of parents are in such denial over this kind of stuff. It's like, it's better to actually face it, admit it, think about it, than to pretend it doesn't happen. And so when it does happen to your kid, it's actually more intense to your kid, more hurtful to them, going to cause more problems.
Okay. Have you had your say here? Can we move on? Because I don't want this to be too much. This podcast to be too long. Yeah. I want to move on because this guy looks like he has a picture of a guy who has made a bong out of a microscope. That's what it looks like. The picture looks like to me.
That's true. It does kind of look like that. And he's got a Technicolor lab coat on, so he may have been using the bong.
He might have.
No, the article in question is actually about the role of placeholders in science. And what it was talking about here was about if you know that there's something there, even if you can't prove it, you put a placeholder. You put a name for something, and then either you prove later on that the thing exists, or you find out that there's something else there in its place. So it was talking about physics has a long history of particles that were predicted based on the math, but not detected for years. On the other hand, it's talked about situations where scientists insert a placeholder for something they don't understand but have gone down the wrong path, like phlogiston and ether, those were big in the 1800s.
Right.
There was supposed to be phlogiston in the spaces in between things, like in the spaces in between spaces.
Okay.
They talk in here about Darwin, though, as well, and the fact that his theory of evolution was really intended to be a placeholder for later on when people, essentially Darwin's theory of evolution doesn't actually take into account the way genetics works. But that's because Darwin didn't know. They didn't know anything about this. He just knew that something was happening there, and he put a process in place as a placeholder for later on when we start to actually understand how things works.
Yeah, right. Okay. Sure. Well, and he just started the theory too, I mean, and it was up to other scientists to flush it out and make it more relevant, which they've done.
He came up with a theory about a biological process by which traits get passed along during fertilization.
Right.
So,
and he was wrong about a lot of things. He gave us a general framework. He gave us his observations, and from there we were able to test that and move on.
But that's not that unusual in science.
That's how science is supposed to work.
He came up with the basics with the knowledge he had at the time, and he put it together, and there were mistakes because he only had so much knowledge. And so then, later generations take that and add to it and repair the mistakes.
Yep. All right. Yeah. Excellent. So, anything more to say on that?
I feel like I've said what I had to say about it. I just found it an interesting article.
It was a good article and worth reading, and getting your mind around the fact of really how science does work and how it happens.
All right. Anything else, guys?
I think we're good.
All right. Very good. I'll play us out.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to the Amateur Skeptics podcast. For more information about the Amateur Skeptics, go to amateurskeptics.com. To send us feedback, suggestions, or big flaming insults, feel free to contact us at WTF@amateurskeptics.com. Other contact information can be found on our website.
To leave a voicemail for the Amateur Skeptics, you can do that at 720-295-7785. Music with this podcast is provided by OFM. You can find out more about OFM at myspace.com/OFMHQ. The Amateur Skeptics podcast is released under Creative Commons, no derivative 3.5 license. We'd love to have you share our work with other people. Please just do not edit or change the content.